Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colleen Gillis. I am an attorney with Cooley. And for those of you that haven't heard me make my spiel before, I've had the honor and privilege of working with Brambleton for almost 20 years now. And very, very happy to have had the relationship with Brambleton that I've had. And just look for a little bit more context. I don't live far from Brambleton. I don't live in the community, but I live off Evergreen Mills Road, so I'm super close. I'm joined this afternoon with Steve Schulte, and Steve is with Brambleton, has been involved with Brambleton even longer than I have, since the very first shovel in the ground, very first piece of infrastructure here for Brambleton. And so I'm going to hopefully be able to handle all the questions, but Steve's got an expertise and from the engineering side and obviously insider information from the developer perspective. And so he might have some information that I don't necessarily have, and glad that he's with us this afternoon. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. One, we're going to go through a presentation, share some information, some changes, even if you watch the Board of Supervisors public hearing presentation, some changes that we've made since then, number one. Number two, we're going to take questions at the end of the presentation. I've also gotten some questions, some of them as late breaking as 20 minutes ago from the community, and I will address those. The best way, the fastest way to get your question answered is to put it into the chat to questions. We've designated somebody as our question keeper. And so if you can send your questions directly to questions, they will forward those questions to me, and we'll figure out we'll answer those. If for some reason there's a question that doesn't, we can't answer today, you've stumped us, you've stumped the presenters, we will be sure to get back with you with an answer. Lastly, if you don't want to put it in the chat, you want to raise your hand, you actually want to be heard, raise your hand through the raise your hand function here on Zoom, and we'll get to you at the very end of the presentation. We're going to handle the ones that are in chat first, before we go to kind of live questions. You also may have noticed that this presentation is being recorded. You might see the flashing record light on the screen. We are recording this. This presentation will be posted on the YouTube page, so that if you have to leave, if you're like, I can't stay all the way to the end, we are going to post it, and you'll get a chance to see the balance of the meeting if for some reason you have to leave. Additionally, you probably saw in the notices, I'm going to underscore one last thing, and that is we've got 4 more of these meetings planned. They are not Harry Potter sequels. You don't have to go to the remaining meetings if you're not so inclined. Don't feel obligated. We're going to make the same presentation. And again, any questions that come up in those meetings that haven't come up in a previous meeting, they will get posted. And so, you will have the opportunity to see if there are other information that's posted here. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. The name of the application is Brambleton South Industrial Properties. The application number that links it to the process in the county is ZMap 2020-0003. Next slide. Okay. Next slide. Awesome. So you all are intimately familiar with this current development map, at least, the bones and the structure of it. Everything that's in red is a unit or a home that is owner occupied, right? It's a home that somebody has purchased, somebody's living in. And so that is all the established portions of Brambleton. Everything that's in purple is what we would consider to be, in that tweener experience, right? We've got some lots that have been delivered out to end users and homeowners, but there might be some additional units within that section that still are yet to be delivered or yet to be constructed. And then everything that's yellow here is a lot that is not yet for sale, is not yet owner occupied. It's a section that's yet to come. So as you look at this overall map, what you can see is that the vast majority of Brambleton is fully built out. And additionally, We've got, Birchwood, and then a small section in the northwest corner of Brambleton that is in the middle of selling right now, not fully sold out. One update on this slide is that the section that's just south of the town center, the townhome section, I'm circling it right now, that should be red. And in our next version of this map, we will turn it red. And then what is blue on this map are undeveloped parcels yet to be developed. And you'll see the 3 parcels on the southern end of the community. So I know the HOA has presented an exhibit identifying these parcels, and the HOA has identified this parcel as parcel 1, this parcel as parcel 2, and the parcel we're talking about today has been identified in the map provided by the HOA as parcel number 3. All 3 of these parcels are on the southern end of Brambleton, and they have been planned by the county to be developed in the case of 1 and 3 for industrial. And in the case of parcel 1 and the part of parcel 3 have been also zoned for industrial uses for many, many years. When Brambleton was first approved, there was a vision that you would put residential, in one portion of the community, and then in another portion of the community, you would do your residential development. What's important to note about this exhibit is that parcel number 3 is on the south side of the Broad Run floodplain. We saw some comments from people after the public hearing a couple of weeks back that said, if you're going to do data centers, you ought to do it on parcel 3. And so we're grateful that there is some consistency that yes, putting it on the other side of the floodplain from the balance of Brambleton makes a lot of sense. The parcels 1 and 2 that I already identified, those parcels are in for a rezoning right now. And we're hoping that they get to actually public hearing in the county later this year, later in 2022. Those parcels would be rezoned for residential development largely. And this parcel that I'm circling right now in particular is currently zoned for industrial. There is the option to do data center there by right today, but Brambleton, the developer, is proposing to take it out of that zoning designation that would permit by right data centers and to put it into residential, recognizing the incompatibility of data centers right across Evergreen Mills Road from that property. And so that's forthcoming, but wanted to give you a heads up that was approved today, or rather entitled today, and that we're looking to change that so we don't put data centers across the street from residential. Next slide. And this is the location of the property. In 2019, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors looked at this area, looked at this part of the county and said, does this property and the parcels around it make sense to be planned for something different? And what you can see here is that the parcel itself is right in the airplane path of Dulles Airport. It's also surrounded by data centers here and here and here, and very close to the Novec Service Center on Evergreen Mills Road. As a result, next slide. And before I could move to even the next slide, the existing zoning on the property, as you look at this property, is split between PDGI, planned development, general industrial, even heavier industrial development than would be permitted by PDIP, which is what we're requesting, and CR1, Countryside Residential 1. Because of its location within the 65 LDN, which is a noise contour that relates to Dulles Airport. Because of that, residential development is prohibited in this area. And so you can see here that the vast majority of the property that we would put data centers on is zoned PDGI. It's adjacent to PDGI land. And as a result of that and its location within the 65 LDN, next slide, the county changed the designation for the property to plan it for suburban industrial mineral extraction. This plan was passed by the Board of Supervisors in June of 2019, and everything that's got that blue wash on it is planned for suburban industrial mineral extraction. Next slide. Suburban industrial mineral extraction as a place type. And the place type and the plan for the county says this is what we'd like to see developed on the property. You can see that the core uses are things like general and heavy manufacturing and assembly, warehousing, contractor with outdoor storage, data centers, outdoor storage, public utility, quarry, things of that nature, what this land is supposed to be used for. Brambleton looked at this use and said, okay, data centers are the most compatible of those uses, given its location at the absolute southern end of Brambleton, and as a result, filed the application that we're here to talk about. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And this, as I said earlier, this property is separated from the residential community to the north by significant area of floodplain. The Broad Run floodplain runs right through here. And because it's really hard to tell scale here, we have measured the floodplain and estimate it to be approximately 800 feet wide, not in the widest part, not in the narrowest part, but roughly 800 feet wide. So obviously 800 feet is a couple football fields. It's a significantly wide section of the Broad Run floodplain. And not only is that a significant separation just in distance, but next slide, there's also significant areas of tree conservation on the property. And everything that you see on this slide that's purple is tree conservation area. And so there's also, so when we come in and we do this development, these are areas that we've proffered to preserve as tree conservation area. To be clear, we're talking about data center. Let me change the color of my pen. Data center development, did not change. Data center development on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road. And we're proposing just PDIP uses on this side of Belmont Ridge Road. Now, since the public hearing, we've reduced the scope or the possible intensity of our development. So when we were at the public hearing at the Board of Supervisors, our proposal was for 4 million square feet of data center development. And it was just a strict application of the formula by the county of acreage times floor area ratio to come up with 4 million square feet of development. Our next version of the proffers will reduce that permitted development intensity from 4 million square feet to 2 million square feet. So we're cutting the possible density on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road in half. And similarly, we're reducing the possible intensity of development on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road in half as well. So that possible maximum density on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road would be 350,000 square feet. Now, one of the things, if you watched the hearing that you heard Supervisor Buffington ask us to consider would be to proffer out some uses on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road. And so in addition to reducing the possible maximum square footage that could be constructed on the west side, we're also proffering out the possibility of doing data centers on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road, proffering out data centers as well as monopoles. And so we are trying to, eliminate what we perceived to be the most concerning uses on the west side of the property. Next slide. As we talk about floodplain and we talk about tree conservation areas, obviously there may be, somebody might go, wait a minute, what's going on from an environmental perspective? We worked very closely with the county's natural resources team through this process, through our rezoning process, to determine, to work through any possible concerns or issues. And we have no outstanding concerns or issues from the natural resources team. If you did what I did every single day, you'd go, that's a pretty big achievement. Most applications end up at the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors with still remaining natural resources issues. We don't have any. And this is in part because we are committing to such a significant area of tree conservation. We've got our SCR buffer, which is a river and stream corridor resources buffer, which means that outside of the floodplain, we will put another 50 foot of no touch, no developed buffer around the floodplain. We're doing multiple LID measures, and LID is a low impact development measure, which treats any of the stormwater, the rainwater runoff to ensure that it's treated before it runs into the floodplain or any of the streams. Pervious parking spaces, latest habitat survey language to ensure that we're not, in developing this property, that we're not inadvertently impacting any species. We're also committing to use Northern Virginia native species with an emphasis on Northern Virginia native species. And so really trying to ensure that this is as environmentally sensitive a project as possible. And then additionally, a mechanical equipment testing restriction to ensure that the mechanical equipment is not tested in hours that could in any way, shape, or form impact our neighbors. Next slide. Additionally, we've got building design standards, parking lot screening, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, on-site employee visitor amenity spaces. And then through the floodplain, we are also providing an easement to Loudoun County Parks and Rec to create a linear park that someone could walk through and commute through in that area. Next slide, that's great. You may have seen that we shared these images for what the design of the data center could look like at the public hearing. I'm pleased to report that we've worked very hard since then to see if we can update those images, and I'll show you those in a moment or two. But next slide. But additionally, and you may have seen these images at the public hearing if you watched, there's a significant, huge berm that is existing on the north side of the floodplain on the south of Evergreen Mills Road. And these are pictures of that. You can drive out there today and go take a look at it. There'll be no snow because we didn't get snow today. It's kind of crazy. But this is a berm that's between 22 and 24 feet high. They are what is notoriously known as the Brambleton Berms. It's got a reputation elsewhere in Loudoun County with significant mature trees that you can see that were planted along and on top of the berm. Next slide. And this berm does such a great job of shielding what's on the south side of the floodplain because of its height, because of the plantings that will grow and mature over time, that you can see that there are power lines that run through the floodplain behind this and very, very much obscured by this berm. So this berm does a great job of shielding and screening whatever is going to happen on the south side of the berm. We think it's really important to underscore this because as we're thinking about where these are, Brambleton, the developer, has done so much to do everything they can to create both spatial separation from a distance perspective by putting the floodplain in between any existing or future residential development on the north side of the floodplain from what is comp plan endorsed and improved or comp plan recommended for the south side of the floodplain. But in addition to this, with no obligation whatsoever to do it, they've also added the significant berm, even though nobody at the county asked them to do it, even though nobody requested that it be done, they did it to create that additional separation. Next slide. Well, let me clear that off. But like I said, we've got some updated images. And so we've been working with designers and with the prospective end user to do everything that we can to ensure that these data centers look as much like an office building as possible. And so what you can see here is you can see that there's a number of areas of glass on the building, which create that feeling that it's an office building. But then also the variety of materials. You can't necessarily see this on this image, but there's some setback and relief provided along the facade. So it's not just one long, straight, flat building. And then obviously you've got some variation in the height of the building as well across the roof line to create some of that relief. Additionally, and important to note, is keeping with that Brambleton theme, these are very much earth tones. These are not the same sort of colors that you might see elsewhere for data centers in Loudoun County. Next slide. And we asked the designer to take a look at, what might this look like beyond some existing trees, beyond some planted trees. How would it look in real life? Because sometimes it's hard to take a two-dimensional image and make it into a three-dimensional image. And so this is an artist rendering of what that could look like. Next slide. And because we asked them to pull it together pretty quickly, this is another rendering, not situated. I want to be very clear. This is not pertinent. This is not particular to an actual location on our site, but just gives you a sense for how it might look from drivers by, passers by. There would be a significant berm in between the road and these buildings. But this gives you, again, just another image of how it might look. This is not specifically cited on our property. I just want to be very, very clear about that. Next slide. There have been also some questions about improving Belmont Ridge Road. And we fully agree that Belmont Ridge Road needs to be improved. Circle back to the beginning of the presentation. I talked about 2 other parcels that are undeveloped and are in for rezoning. It is our plan and expectation that we will be committing to the ultimate widening and ultimate improvement of Belmont Ridge Road with that application. And so we understand and appreciate that Belmont Ridge Road needs to be improved, but it's not typical, and it would be very, it's difficult to justify the cost in connection with an application like this. And so just to underscore how significant this improvement will be, when I talked earlier about the broad run floodplain being 800 feet-ish in width in this area, we're going to need a bridge that's going to span an 800-foot section of the broad run floodplain. That bridge is so expensive. It's more expensive than the bridge that was constructed on Loudoun County Parkway across the broad run floodplain south of Birchwood. And so we're thinking it's in the dozens of millions of dollars, $25–30 million just for that bridge, to say nothing of the actual asphalt that would need to be put into place on the north and south side. But what's really important is people talk about Belmont Ridge Road, completely understand the concerns, is that putting a data center on this property, as opposed to one of those other industrial uses that the county plan calls for, actually reflects a significant capping of any potential traffic impacts for this property. Data centers are notoriously known as a very, very low traffic generator. And it's one of the things that has made it as attractive as it is, that you can put these uses that are high tax generators in a location without impacting transportation and the road network or impacting schools. And so just to hone on drill down on the fact that it is a low traffic generator means that we're not going to significantly impact the intersection of Belmont Ridge Road and Arcola Mills Drive. Now, with regard to that, we still understand that there's improvements that need to be made. And so what you can see from this image, running top to bottom is Belmont Ridge Road. And you can see that we are committing to additional striping and additional turn lanes, et cetera, on Belmont Ridge Road. But more significantly, next slide. More significantly, you can see the improvements to the Arcola Mills Drive, Belmont Ridge Road intersection. And you can see the additional lanes, you can see the additional turn lanes, the through lanes, et cetera. One of the things, that we heard quite a bit about is that this intersection gets quite clogged with somebody trying to turn left or somebody trying to, because there's not enough room there for somebody to allow somebody to turn left, for example, on Briarfield Lane or whatnot. And it's a very challenging intersection. So what you can see here is that this application will add additional lanes so that one can continue to travel on Arcola Mills Drive, and as well without impacting somebody's ability to turn left on Briarfield or whatnot. Additional lanes will also be provided on Belmont Ridge Road. Next slide. So this is the point of the conversation or the meeting where we've got that we'll answer some questions. Before we jump into people's questions, and please send them to questions. It's one of the folks that you can send a question to, that you can chat with in the chat. And so we got a couple of questions in advance. One of the questions really was, which parcel are we talking about? So hopefully we've clarified which parcel we're talking about. We're talking about a parcel that's all the way on the southern end of Brambleton across Broad Run Floodplain. And the data centers will not be in the backyards, if you will, of any existing homes. Really important there. We got some traffic questions about Belmont Ridge Road. Hopefully those questions have been addressed as well. And then we've got a couple of others, and I'll walk through them, and then we'll address the ones that we've gotten in the chat. One of the questions was, how do you see this rezoning as part of the vision of Brambleton? So as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, as mentioned there, this portion of the project has always been planned and or zoned for industrial. As you saw from that zoning map, a significant portion of the property we're rezoning with this application is already zoned industrial, and it has been zoned industrially with the Brambleton community that approved many of your homes. And so we see it as part of the vision because of the way that it's always been, but then also the county came through and replanned the vision for this property to be that suburban industrial mineral extraction. Second, what size data centers could fit on the Evergreen Mills parcel? And I'm assuming that we're talking about that portion of PDIP that is in for rezoning for residential. We have not done a test fit to determine what size data centers could fit there. We really do think it's a better location for residential, and so we're processing that. We don't have a good sense for how big those would be, but we can certainly look at that. There's a question about the height under the PDIP district, and pursuant to the comp plan, buildings have a by right height of 60 feet, and there's an ability to go beyond that by providing additional setbacks. Why was this application completed before the Evergreen Mills Road application? We really prioritized the delivery of residential elsewhere on the property, as opposed to working through those rezoning applications. Has the Brambleton Group completed a visual impact analysis similar to cell tower planning for this site? We have not done a siting yet. We've been struggling or hustling to get this together for today's meeting, but we have not done that analysis yet. We really wanted to understand what the architecture of the building would be first and foremost. Do you plan to address the feedback from the Board of Supervisors about the parcel west of Belmont Ridge Road? Yes, as we mentioned, we're going to, in the next version of our proffers, reduce the maximum density from 700,000 square feet to 350,000 square feet or less. No data center, no monopoles. How much power will this property require? Well, it'll ultimately come down to how many buildings get put on the property. And so we don't know yet. That's for the end user to determine. But obviously, the fact that we've got existing power lines that run through the floodplain makes this an attractive location for data centers. Have you made progress on determining if a substation will be needed? We're a little bit in the chicken and the egg situation because we're in a chicken and the egg situation because we've got a circumstance in which we can't get a commitment to power until we have something approved and share that with Novec. And so we're a little bit betwixt and between for right now. How many buildings will be built? So we are still working with the end user to determine what that site plan will look like. We think it's about 5 buildings that could be accommodated on the property. When will a site plan be available? It's up to the end user. They'd like to move quickly, but they're not spending a lot of time and energy and money on developing a site plan until we get through this process. With the site not in the new 65 LDN, would residential be appropriate on the property? So as I mentioned earlier, the site is, even if it's not within the 65 LDN, it's still within the flight path of Dulles Airport, literally right under it. As I mentioned earlier, I live close to Brambleton. I'm not in the flight path, but obviously this property is completely under the flight path. And so that's why we thought it was appropriate when the county designated the property for industrial. There were a number of questions about data centers and what do we know about data centers. So why are there so many data centers being located in this area? A lot of data centers in this area because the price of power in Virginia is lower than in other jurisdictions. But additionally, there's a significant point of presence in Ashburn that allows for faster it's a May East switch, and it's really the heart of and the initial seed for the data center industry that allows for less latency and greater speed between one data center to another. Does the PDIP district allow only for data centers or other types of uses? And so I mentioned that earlier. On the east side of Belmont Ridge Road, we would only be permitted to do data centers. On the west side of Belmont Ridge Road, we are not. We're going to do the exact opposite. We can't do data centers, can't do monopoles. But the PDIP district allows for any number of other uses. It allows for office. It allows for flexing, like a St. John Properties type of project, like you might see on on Loudoun County Parkway and Ashburn Crossing. There's a whole variety of uses that are permitted there, but it really eliminates a lot of those heavier, noxious, more loud and noisy types of uses. There was a question about, does the heavy use of energy by data centers create additional risks of power disruption? Not that we're aware of. In fact, I know from working with other data center clients that data centers have been asked at times to go offline, to take their centers offline and rely on their generators when it's a time of peak usage, so that the energy companies, the power companies, can use that to power houses and get to get our air conditioners running when it's 100 degrees or whatnot. So have not seen that experience, and data center companies would tell you that they actually are a benefit to the grid in that way. Are there any environmental hazards associated with data centers? Not aware of any of them. As discharge of chemicals, air pollution, etc. That was one of the questions. Not aware of any of those. We haven't, there hasn't been any of those risks raised by the county during this process. So no knowledge of any of that. How beneficial would the proposed data centers be to the local tax base? Significantly, very, very, very beneficial. Outdated estimates are that this application would generate roughly $36 to $40 million a year in tax revenue to Loudoun County. It doesn't include state taxes or federal taxes or anything like that, just to Loudoun County every single year if it was developed with 2,000 square feet of development. So significant benefit to the tax base to all of us.
2 million. Not 2,000.
Yeah, lots. Okay. Okay, so nobody sent them to questions. I've gotten, I guess some people sent them to questions, but I've gotten a bunch of questions in. So let's see. How will the proximity of a data center affect the property values for properties nearer to this development? So we're not aware of any studies that have been done about the impact of data centers on property values. Obviously, a benefit to us is the tax rate in Loudoun County, and so we all share in that. But we don't have any of it. But it's part of the reason we have really tried to separate this data center from any existing houses, and those parcels to the north those parcels to the north of the floodplain are yet to be developed. How much distance would be maintained between the data center and Evergreen Mills Road, specifically from the houses which face Evergreen Mills Road? Also, is there a plan to add landscaping so that privacy is maintained? So as mentioned earlier, we have, I don't know if we have that distance. I don't have that distance at my fingertips, but there's going to be from Evergreen Mills Road, we'll have Evergreen Mills Road, then additional development, residential development in all likelihood, then that berm, that 22 to 24 foot tall berm, then an 800-foot floodplain, and then the data centers beyond that. So I don't know exactly what that all totals out to be, but it's significant. And obviously the approval of additional residential just on the south side of Evergreen Mills Road will provide an additional buffer to that.
Hey, Colleen, I need to correct you. So there Sure. is an area that where that berm was placed was behind the barn itself.
Okay.
But on the other side of the pond that's next to the barn is actually another lake. I can't put a 22-foot berm on top of the lake. So I think that was a little bit of a, incorrect statement there, but you're right. There will be residential, and then the large floodplain, and then, more wooded areas than are behind the barn. So we were trying to definitely screen with that berm areas that didn't have as much vegetation on the other side of the floodplain.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Okay, another question. What plans are there for the Belmont Ridge Road that splits the two parts of the area under consideration? So as I said, our plan is with the next application to do those road improvements to improve Belmont Ridge Road. That would include the bridge to span that 800-ish foot section of the Broad Run floodplain. And that I'm looking down a little bit, we need a 4-lane on Belmont Ridge Road, which is 2-way near the Arcola intersection. And that is what will happen there. It will become 4 lanes with that improvement. Is there any study done on the impact of data centers on the health of people in close proximity to it? I don't have any knowledge of a study that's been done with regard to that. Obviously, there are data centers elsewhere in Ashburn that are far closer to data centers, or data centers are closer to homes than what it is that we're proposing here today. You've got other ones that are closer. So I don't have any information about that. I have not come across it. Nobody sent anything to me. Nobody's raised it. So I don't have an answer on that. Will the developer consider a proffer to disallow data centers in the current countryside zoning area? The concern is the adjacency on Belmont Ridge Road on the east side. In other words, I'd like to see the same restrictions on both the east and west sides of Belmont Ridge Road and the immediate adjacent spaces. I'm not sure that I follow the question, but obviously the current countryside residential area is planned for industrial zoning. And so we are proffering to disallow data centers west of Belmont Ridge Road. But in the portion that's on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road, as part of that overall development envelope, we are going to continue with our request to rezone that to PDIP as well. So as a resident, I have concerns about the traffic impacts, especially on Belmont Ridge Road, which already has longstanding and serious traffic safety concerns. 100% get it. We understand the concerns, and we are moving forward with that rezoning application. How does this impact development / construction of the cultural center? This doesn't impact it at all. That is on a different parcel north of the floodplain. And so that is separate. Steve, do you have anything to add to the improvement of that?
No, we're actually ongoing with the construction of the Barn Performing Arts Center. That's where the berm was actually shown. And, we're doing everything we can to work through the final architecture on that. We're trying to, get to that point here in the next year or so to have that completed.
Great. What else can come if not data center? So as I mentioned, it will be specific. The east side of Belmont Ridge Road, it can only be data center. If for some reason the data center market goes, we'll have to come back in and amend the proffers. We'll have to come in and ask for something new to happen there. There's no way to change that out without going back through this entire process. On the west side, we're proffering out data centers. And so you can't get data centers on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road. Mention monopole is possible at west side of the signal. Is application updated for it? So let me be clear. If I was not clear, today the zoning permits monopoles on the west side of Belmont Ridge Road. We are updating our proffers. They will be submitted tomorrow to eliminate the possibility of monopoles on the property. There will not be a possibility of monopoles anywhere on the property. Why Brambleton is always focused on building houses rather than developing infrastructure. We need some fast food restaurants and gyms in or around Brambleton. So with regard to infrastructure, so if you're new to the community, you may not recognize how much Brambleton has done over the years. Brambleton, if you've driven Loudoun County Parkway between the Greenway and Brambleton, if you've driven Ryan Road between Loudoun County Parkway and Brambleton, those roads were completely constructed by Brambleton, not by the county, not by VDOT. Those roads were completed by Brambleton in advance of developing the community as a way to get people to the community. Additionally, Loudoun County Parkway, if you've ever driven on Loudoun County Parkway from Creighton Road down to 606, there's another improvement that Brambleton did at its expense to ensure that the people who live in Brambleton have great transportation access. But that's not all. In addition to that, Brambleton has given the school sites for 3 elementary schools, 2 high schools, and a middle school. And that says nothing of the traffic signals and the parks and the other things that it's done, much of which was done in advance of people moving in so that it was a fully complete community. So, and in fact, today, Brambleton, and you probably know this, Brambleton is working on the widening of Ryan Road from North Star Boulevard to a point west before Evergreen Mills Road. And so Brambleton is absolutely focused on the infrastructure. And when it comes to, those other things like retail and restaurants and gyms, Brambleton has for many years worked really hard to deliver those uses and continue to deliver retail space. Brambleton, and I'll probably shut up in a second and let Steve address this. I mean, with the construction of the retail that's at the intersection of Evergreen Mills Road and North Star, the retail section that's down there by the CVS and the newly opened gas station, the retail that's being constructed, the space that's becoming available at Birchwood. Brambleton wants nothing more than for tenants to be in there, not only because it matters to you all as residents, but because that means that they get a return on their investment. And it's not good to just have it sitting there empty. So Brambleton is absolutely always working to develop those sorts of uses. But Steve, you want to add additional comment?
And we don't look at it as uses as much as services to the community. I mean, that's what makes the community. We made a big investment to get the movie theater here, and that far out for a subdivision to have a movie theater was a really difficult challenge, and we were able to overcome that. So, we absolutely think that the Brambleton Town Center is an amenity. We think that these other amenities, Hanson Park is going to be a wonderful amenity this spring, and then the retail space that Colleen mentioned down at Evergreen and North Star is going to blossom once North Star gets extended, which is in the next year or so. I know that the Department of Capital Infrastructure is completing the design and working towards making the completion of North Star right now. I think that's in the next several years that it will be extended down to 50 and then beyond. So listen, after 22 years, we're seeing some of the dots finally connected, and that's kind of an exciting thing for us. That, we're actually seeing light at the end of the tunnel instead of 22 years into it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Steve. Okay, is the barn and church on Evergreen Mills Road to Loudoun County Parkway planned? Steve, do you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, say the church.
And the question is the barn and church on Evergreen Mills Road to Loudoun County Parkway planned? I'm assuming that this has to do with the Performing Arts Center, but I'm not sure.
So we have a site plan that we're getting ready to finalize based on the final architecture of the barn / Performing Arts Center. Is that where they're talking? The intersection of Belmont Ridge and Evergreen is what I think we're talking across from the fire station. That is planned. It is something that we're working on. We're not ready to release the final architecture at this point, but we are trying to advance the ball with the berming, some of the parking, and the landscaping at this time until we can actually finalize something that we publicize.
Okay. What is the distance between parcel 1 and parcel 3? So that's the distance between what we call, Steve, the south of Shreveport and the Brambleton South Industrial Parcel. Will they be too close to make parcel 1 unattractive to home buyers? So Steve, you might know the answer to the distance question, but I'll say we have an asset that we want to sell for houses, that we want builders to come in and to pay top dollar for so that they can sell amazing houses and everybody's home prices, as in the neighborhood increases. So we are thinking about those sorts of things, and we don't think, having talked to home builders and talked to others, that parcel 1 and parcel 3 are too close together. to make.
Not at all. Actually, if you think about it, we have all those wetlands and we actually created wetland banks down there. We have a trail that runs along the Broad Run, the tributary to the Broad Run. That's actually a beautiful park. If you haven't walked down there, you really need to walk down there. And we actually look at, imposing architectural guidelines and screening and buffering with this data center that you will not, you will feel like you're actually in a parkland. We're not going to give up that park. And as Colleen mentioned, we have a 300-foot dedication that we're giving to Loudoun County parks, where they're going to have a continuous trail along that Broad Run tributary. And that is kind of an exciting prospect. The more missing links that can be completed to make that a continuous trail is something that the supervisor's been looking for in terms of connecting the trails. So listen, we really think that park is still going to be outstanding.
Okay, next question, and we're coming down the home stretch. Just to respect everybody's time, we'll wrap this up at 1:30. If there are other questions that you want answered that we don't get to today, please put them in the chat anyway. You can also include your email address and we'll email you the responses back. If you go, please let me know the answer to this, or your phone number, and we're happy to call you as well. My questions are: one, in order to fully understand and account for the impacts on Belmont Ridge Road, can the plans be put on hold until we receive the results of the Loudoun County Belmont Ridge Safety and Operational Study? So what you may not be aware of is that with any application, there is a commensurate traffic study that's also prepared and submitted. We don't come up with what the scope and the scale of that study is on our own. The developer doesn't. In fact, what ends up happening is that our traffic engineer meets with the Department of Transportation and Capital Infrastructure, and they figure out what the scope of that should be. And they apply growth rates, and they apply, they assume that there'll be continued growth of traffic and cars on the road in the area. And we do a study based on that. There are no outstanding traffic issues, and we've gone above and beyond. We've studied traffic, intersections that are offsite to our property. We've done all of these things and have addressed all of those issues. And then I'll just underscore yet again, data centers are notoriously, and not just in reputation, but in actuality, one of the lowest traffic generators for any sort of development that you could possibly have. Offices, well more. Retail's even more than that. Housing is not a ton more, but the point is that, you've got a piece of property that if developed with data centers will not be significantly impactful to the road network. And so the other thing is that your next question is, if not, how will the findings of the study and the rezoning plans be aligned so that they do not create unanticipated impacts? So obviously, as mentioned earlier, we've got this other zoning application coming through just on the other side of the floodplain. And again, there will be a separate study that's prepared, analyzing that and keeping in mind and in scope all of the things that are happening in this area. And so that application will again study this intersection. But importantly, when you're thinking about safety, it's really important to note that it's with that application that Brambleton's intention is to go ahead and make those ultimate Belmont Ridge Road improvements, widening Belmont Ridge Road, bridge over the floodplain, et cetera. So we expect that when the traffic comes with those applications, that this infrastructure will be in place. Will the proposal impact Belmont Ridge Road classification as a minor collector road level 6 per the Loudoun County 2019 Countywide Transportation Plan? And if so, how? No, the Countywide Transportation Plan was planned with the land uses, with the envisioned land uses programmed into that classification. So we don't anticipate that changing. If you want to talk to somebody at DTCI, they can tell you the same thing. What specific guardrails mitigation are being proposed to address the increase? We shared the images of the additional lanes. Those will all be done to VDOT standards. All of those plans will be reviewed by the county and by VDOT to ensure that they are up to standard. Yep. Can the developer consider adding barriers, berms, tall trees, walls along the whole Brambleton section of Belmont Ridge Road from Evergreen to North Star as part of this project? And so We are adding berms to the data center frontage along Belmont Ridge Road there. But in terms of from Evergreen to North Star, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that the metrics, the points of beginning and end make sense to me, but maybe you understand, Steve, from Evergreen to North Star. Yeah, because obviously Evergreen and North Star are intersection.
What's challenging is it used to be old Evergreen, which is now Arcola Mills. You have Evergreen that now runs. So, it's confusing for some people, but,
Right.
North Star runs north-south, those run east and west, and it's a triangular. It's really hard to orient yourself in that regard. But like you say, we're trying to do berms along Belmont Ridge. We're going to be doing our natural berms down along North Star. What's in front of Evermont Trace and the fire station are what they are today. So there's nothing we can really do about that.
In the transportation improvement slide, I noticed an absence of a turn into the east side parcel from Arcola Mills. I think that there should be at least a right in and right out from Arcola Mills Road.
So we are going to go through the final design, but I actually thought we might have one entrance, one point of ingress egress into that triangular piece of property. I think we had planned that, but that's going to be based on final design.
We're talking about the east side. So on the east
side, we don't. That's not our property. I mean, we're too close to the intersection to have that on
right
on Arcola.
The east side of the property, access will only be provided from Belmont Ridge Road, which works because the traffic impacts from a data center are so low. And so we don't have access to that east side of our property from Arcola Mills Drive. How much minimum distance between the data center and the houses facing Evergreen Mills Road? We've already talked about that. Okay, I already talked about that. Loudoun now last year reported $16 million deficit on data centers in a couple of years. What do you say to this? So it's actually not a deficit. And I've had multiple conversations. You can feel free to call Buddy Reiser at the Department of Economic Development if you'd like, but had plenty of conversations with this. The data center, it was a projected shortfall. It was not a deficit. It was that as a result of COVID and the chip shortage that everybody experienced, the data centers in Loudoun County could not replace their servers and their racks as quickly as expected, or they couldn't install new servers and racks because of the supply chain issues. As a result of that, because a significant portion of the tax revenue generated from data centers comes from the personal property tax. As a result of that, that's why they had they projected one number, and then they got halfway through the year and said, wait, it's probably going to be less because they weren't able to install as many servers and racks. And so the data centers themselves are still the biggest part of the biggest revenue generator for the county. And they do a huge work towards us as taxpayers not having to pay for new schools and road construction and park improvements and things of that nature. Okay, we got a couple more questions. Let me read this one. As part of the Belmont Ridge Road County Safety Study document, we noticed, quote, according to the Virginia Department of Transportation published traffic volumes, the average daily traffic volume on Belmont Ridge Road varies by segment, with 18,000 trips at Evergreen Mills Road to 14,000 trips at North Star Boulevard. And per item 6, Brambleton South Industrial Properties, we noticed it mentioned the proposed rezoning would generate 1,107 AM peak hour, 1,072 PM peak hour, and 10,824 average daily trips for the site. So does this mean traffic could double on Belmont Ridge Road with the proposed rezoning? So no, the traffic is not doubling. But I would have to be
so
honest.
Why don't we get Chris Turnbull, our transportation engineer, to kind of break that down, and we'll try to explain that at that next meeting if we can, because it's really complicated, and even I can't kind of explain that properly.
Right. Okay. Do we know the effect?
Or we can write it back. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right. Do we know the effective data center for the neighborhood in terms of utility drain? These buildings take up huge Wi-Fi, water, and other utilities. Do we know how much utility they consume every year? Any limit to consume the resources? So Wi-Fi, they're hardwired, and so they have dedicated fiber routes for them. And so it will not impact your ability to get fiber and internet to your home. Water, depending on how these utilities, these facilities are equipped, they could use very little water. They could use moderate amount of water. I'm not sure. But obviously, if there was an issue to the utilities, the county would stop planning data centers for anything in the county.
Yeah, we're hearing that the trend is to go to air cooled. So that old school of having water cooled, cooling is actually, going by the wayside, and they're going mostly to air cooled units, from my understanding.
Okay. Okay. Is there any retail in Brambleton Quarter?
We have one. We don't have any. We have one signed tenant that I don't know if I'm ready to disclose at this point, but we are actively leasing the entire thing.
Okay. Okay. Request I'm making is to increase the setback of the data centers on the east side of Belmont Ridge Road. Like to see a low-rise commercial building adjacent to Belmont Ridge Road and the data center set further into the east parcel. The challenge that we have, it says mirror the development of the west parcel on the Belmont Ridge Road adjacent east parcel. I have no concerns with the data center designs as shown. Thank you. So the challenge that we have with putting in an additional commercial building on that side is what we talked about earlier with regard to access. We cannot, we've got limited access because of the proximity to the intersection with Arcola Mills Drive, and putting a commercial building on that side is going to generate more traffic. From a safety perspective, it's actually going to create issues for Belmont Ridge Road. What you kind of is all good, but it's this residence, this far less retail. Okay. What you kind of facilities is good, but it is obvious to residents that this part of Ashburn has far less retail and restaurants than other areas compared to Broadlands, et cetera. You have not invested in retail opportunities outside of a town center, and the retail projects have lagged behind residential development. So one of the challenges that we have with regard that Broadlands doesn't have is Broadlands is not in an edge condition. Broadlands at the retail Broadlands, let's say at the center with Parallel and the Starbucks and the Virginia Italian Auto, you can look at 360 degrees around that center and you have homes and businesses all around it. At Brambleton, because of decisions by the board and it is what it is. We're not complaining about it, but development, dense development or suburban density development stops at the edge of Brambleton. You move into large lot, single family detached homes in Willowsford and Heartland and other places. It just doesn't create these sort of 360 degree support for that retail that exists in say Broadlands, in say, Ashburn Village or one of those other locations.
Well, also, Colleen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a new phenomenon, and that's called Amazon. And people are now getting everything delivered to their house, and there's no the difficulty of trying to get somebody to come in and get sticks and bricks retail is really difficult right now. And I don't know if you know it, but Brambleton actually has done a really good job of we have almost like 98% occupancy, and we've been able to maintain that throughout COVID because we really hold our tenants like partners, and we really enjoy having that relationship. But listen, retail is an extremely tough business right now, just as office. So it's not as easy as just saying, hey, everybody open the doors and come. We've had areas for available for retail for a long time, and people have to make, as Colleen says, a judgment call of what the traffic is and how much volume they're going to get in order to make that financial investment.
Okay. Okay, we're going to take just a couple, 3 questions more. Why why not put all of the potential development on the east side and leave all the west side as a wildland area? Obviously there's Brambleton is invested in open space areas throughout the community, and where property has been planned for commercial development, you know, that's where the county has decided that it wants it to go. And so it's been planned for commercial development, and that's what we're trying to deliver on. Why do data centers need to be in public density areas? Can we assign some remote locations away from residential area? They don't need people traffic, and neither of the people need it for day-to-day business. I would invite you to reach out to your board of supervisors and tell them that you'd rather these data centers be someplace else. I don't envy their jobs, but obviously the people who live in those remote areas don't feel, they feel similarly to you. I don't want them in my backyard. Can you put them in yours? So,
well, let's also be honest of why data centers are so popular here in Loudoun County. You know, Equinix, which is overall in Waxpool, is the mothership for the internet. And, you know, latency and the distance from that location, from fiber to all these data centers, is extremely important. In addition, we have a very unique thing with the power that's provided off of those transmission lines that run right through the middle of Brambleton is the same source of power that all these data centers in Loudoun County are getting. And that's a unique opportunity for these data centers. And so, listen, there's a reason why data centers are here is because we're uniquely situated next to some, you know, amenities that make those attractive.
Right. Okay. I want to be mindful of people's time. So I do want to, somebody asked a question, how many more data centers are coming in the future? I couldn't tell you. We don't have plans within Brambleton for additional data centers here. Obviously, the Board of Supervisors doesn't approve our residential application on the ground that's planned, that's currently zoned for residential. Like, our preference is to do residential first and foremost. But I don't want to, but if the board denies it, I don't want anybody to call up Steve or me and say, you told us no more. They don't, if the board doesn't would rather us stay with a zoning that's for industrial, that could likely be a data center. Okay. Some of the other questions are suggestions. Please, no more traffic lights on Belmont Ridge Road. We appreciate that.
Stop. Listen, listen. We can't control the traffic signals. So basically, those are done by a warrant by VDOT, and only when VDOT warrants a signal. And then at this point in time, we don't have any more plans on Belmont Ridge Road to put any more signals.
Okay. There's a new elementary school starting from this September 2022, which is 0.5 miles away from the proposed data center. If you're talking about the data center that's down on Arcola Mills Drive, near the Google data centers, there are data centers that are far closer in their development than this one. And so, you know, if there was a concern, the schools would have raised it with staff and obviously and the board, and this wouldn't be happening, but there's no evidence whatsoever that data centers negatively impact it. Somebody asked a question, what is the ZMap number for Parcel 1 application? I don't have that at my fingertips. I'm so sorry. We'll put that out in frequently asked questions. Do I know how many data centers are in Loudoun County? No, I don't. How many of them are closer to residences and communities? I would invite you to look at the Regency community and the Cameron Chase. Those are just two communities off the top of my head that are close. There's also a community that's down on Route 50 that is right in the backyard of data centers. And I think that we've reached the end of the questions. I think we got to the end. Okay, so thank you so much for spending your lunch hour or more with Steve and me today. Maybe next time some people will turn on their cameras, we can see your lovely faces. But we will take this and put this on the YouTube page. We'll probably have to, you know, edit out the beginning little talk. And so other than that, if you've got questions, I'm going to emphasize it again. info@brambleton.com is really the best way to get your answers addressed. My email address is cgillis@cooley.com in case you want to reach out to me, but info@brambleton.com is the #1 way to do that. And with that, Steve, anything else?
No, but thank you all very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.